Do you know your hip shape? Are you a heart? Hi everyone, I'm Glenda with SureFit Designs, whimsically referred to as Glenda the Good Stitch. Well, if you're following along with me, you know the last video I put out was a general introduction to different kinds of hip shapes. And today I'm going to focus on the heart-shaped hip. And if you're following along and you are already a SureFit Designs customer, I would recommend that you have your pant kit instruction book along with your dress kit instruction book handy, because we are going to be talking about the pant pattern as well as the skirt pattern, because obviously that's where we have hip involvement. Okay, so I've gone ahead and put up some tracing vellum here in an effort to get the whole process moving along for you, but we're going to do an explanation of what I have already drawn. Now, if you're a heart-shaped hip person, this is a situation where you're fairly small in the waist, but you blossom out quite quickly in your high hip area, and then your low hip is not as full as your high hip. You are smaller lower down. And you can see the photograph that we're using as a reference. This particular lady has a 30-inch waist, a 40-inch high hip, and a 38-inch low hip. And also I needed to know her crotch measurements, which her back crotch is 13 inches long. So the very first thing that you're going to do in drawing your pattern is, first of all, make sure that you've got your tracing vellum over top of your master pattern. You don't want to be drawing on that. You can use it as many times as you need to as your body changes sizes throughout your lifetime. So number one is draw in your straight of grain marking. And then number two, you are going to be marking in on this, it's called a waist crotch grid. You need to know your back crotch length measurement. Again, in this case, it was 13 inches long and her waist is 30 inches. So as I go up the center of the grid, I'm going to go along, and there's a 12-inch long back crotch. Here's a 13, and it goes on up to 20 inches long. On the waist measurements, it starts at 18, goes up to 52. She's a 30-inch waist, so I'm going to find the number 30. I'm going to follow it up. I'm going to follow her 13 back crotch length measurement down, and that's where you would make your initial dot. Then we're going to establish the back crotch curvature and extension point. So at back crotch point number one, I marked in her low hip measurement number, which was 38, and at back crotch point number two, I also marked in her 38 dot. Now I took the designing stylus, I found the curvature on the stylus. It says match to back crotch point number one, and I take that arrowhead, put it into number one, pivot to the waist point and down to the crotch point extension and connect her curvature. And that is her back crotch curve. To do the waistline, on the other side of the waist crotch grid, which is the side seam, you will also find the 13 going down the angle and slope of the grid. Take the waist measurement, follow it up. Again, where the two lines crisscross, I make a dot. And then I simply connected together the side seam to the center back to create the waistline. And this dart is formed by taking the letter that is nearest the number that you've used for your back crotch. Beside the number 13 is the letter B. Beside the number 12 is the letter A. Beside the number 14 is the letter C. So because she was a 13, I used the letter B, and then I simply connected that dot up to the width of the parallel lines to represent the width of the dart on the back of her pattern. But now we get into the hip line. And this is where you're really going to see how the SureFit Designs pattern follows the shape of your hip line. In this case, a heart-shaped hip. So one of the things that I do when you're taking your measurements is I ask you to do a length measurement from your waist down to where your fullest high hip is. And her level is 2.5 inches down. And so what I ask you to do in the instruction book is to simply measure down from your waist dot 2.5 inches and make a line going across. I'm going to just do this in my erasable colored pencil there because ultimately that line would come out. And I also ask you to measure from your waist down to your low hip. And for this particular lady, she is 6 inches down. And so now I know my high hip level and my low hip level. In order to really get the best curve possible, you need to do a little bit of shifting with the tracing vellum. So I need to know, first of all, her high hip is 40 inches around. And there's it says high hip measurement. There's the 40 dot. So I need to take this line and I just need to shift the tracing vellum down about 1/2 inch. So I've got the tracing vellum just taped up here with some of the removable tape, which makes it really easy to lower the tracing vellum down without ripping the master pattern underneath. So now I'm lined up fairly well with that line going and aiming right towards her number 40. And oh, I should also say, if you haven't heard me say this before, number 1, draw in pencil, because as I start drawing the rest of this, it's going to be in indelible pen, which is not erasable. The pencil erases beautifully on this tracing vellum. And number 2, make sure that you take and you work on your table surface. The only reason I'm working on the wall is so that you can see the demonstration a little bit clearer and better. But you can see that my vellum flops everywhere on me, and I really don't want that happening to you. So make sure you work on the table. So her high hip measurement number is 40 inches around, so I'm going to make another dot right there. And then her low hip is 38 inches, and so I need to do one more shifting. Here's the level of her low hip. She was a very short lady, and I'm going to shift the tracing vellum down one more time until that line that I drew crosses over her number 38. Now the only thing that is important here is when you're doing this shifting is that you make sure that you keep your straight of grain straight right on the existing master pattern that is underneath. And then I'm going to mark off her 38-inch hip dot. Okay, now I need to start connecting these dots together. But before I do, there's one other dot that I want to mark in here, and for the rest of the leg, it's just literally your low hip measurement. So I'm going to mark in her 38 dot there as well. And now I'm going to shift this all back up so that her crotch level is right back in place with the crotch level on the master pattern, and the straight of grain is totally lined up where I initially started. That's very important to establish that you get it back in position, and then you can draw off the rest of the dots for whatever your low hip measurement is. Okay, so now I need to connect those dots together with the designing stylus, which is really easy to do. Again, for those of you who are new, the designing stylus has on it all the curves of your body, and here's the one that says hip curve. Now, I can't put the designing stylus that way because the orientation is not correct. So I just literally need to flop it over. It's still the hip curve on this side. It's just the correct orientation for this pattern. So what I'm doing now is taking the stylus and I'm saying, how can I best connect these first 2 to 3 dots together? And this curvature is going to do it about like that. And then I need to start coming down into these dots. So here I need to flip the stylus over and just continue and make these lines as smooth a connection as possible. Okay, and now the leg basically straightens out, and we're going to come straight down at this point. And this leg width, of course, can vary depending on how loose or tight you want the leg to fit on your pants, but that's not what we're dealing with today. There's another video completely on narrowing the pant leg if you want to, and it's in our YouTube channel as well. Okay, so now I've actually blueprinted to my heart-shaped hips body. And this actually would fit her very well because that's what her body is like. However, this sharp curve is more difficult to sew, and if you want to put a zipper on your side seam, that curvature is going to be very difficult to get a zipper into. So what do? Well, I recommend that you add a secondary dart. The curvier you are, going from your small dimension of your waist into your larger dimension of your high hip, the more you are going to need darts to help you get your pattern fitting you properly. Or let's not just say properly, let's say fitting you better. So what I'm going to show you now is how to add a dart to the pattern, a secondary dart. So we want to, first of all, straighten this side seam. And even though I could use that straight line on the designing stylus, I actually want just a little bit of shape to this, just a little bit of shape. So I'm using this side of the designing stylus, all right? So I've drawn the red line coming up. Now, I need to know how wide that is. And these darts, these secondary darts, can be anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to an inch wide. And that is approximately 3/4 of an inch. And now you might ask yourself, where does this dart go? Well, it's going to go in between this waist fitting dart and your new side seam waist point. So you can measure this and divide it in half. I just visually go like that, and there's my halfway mark. And because this is 3/4 of an inch extension, I'm now going to add on 3/4, excuse me, I have to do a half. So that's 3/8 of an inch there and 3/8 of an inch there. So I've made a mark on either side of my halfway point. Now, these secondary darts, when we put them in, typically aren't as long as the first dart, and they usually aim a little bit to an angle towards wherever your hip bone is. So I'm going to come up about 1 inch from the tip of the first dart, and there we have 1 inch right there. And then I'm going to connect to the first side of the dart and then to the second side of the dart. So that dart that I've just added, and I will also connect right there, like that. This dart right here now has completely shaped, or let's put it this way, removed the extra width that I put at her waistline. But look at the benefit. Number one, I get better shaping going from her small waist to her quite full hip, high hip, and I now can put a zipper in that side seam. So it works really well. So that is how I would recommend working on the pant pattern at the hip line if you're a heart-shaped hip. Now let's carry over and take a look at the skirt on the back of the pattern. And I also should say it doesn't matter whether you're working on the pant or the skirt pattern, that these patterns are called strip-down patterns. So before you go and test them, let me show you this real quickly. I'm going to move back to the pant pattern. You do need to add seam allowances. Again, for those of you who are new and watching this for the first time, you use your designing stylus to add seam allowances, and you know what, this pen is really thick. I'm going to do this one with my pencil, and you can still see it, I'm sure, because I'll do this in red. You put your pencil lead next to the edge of the slot nearest to the outside edge of the designing stylus. And in doing this distance right here is 5/8 of an inch. So you add seam allowances so easily with the designing stylus, okay? So from a stripped down pattern, we now have a pattern with seam allowances, and it is ready to cut and sew and do your testing. All right, so back to the skirt pattern. All right, in the dress kit instruction book, what you're going to do is turn to page 9, and on the right-hand column, it talks about the hip curve. And the very first illustration is on the heart-shaped hip person. Please get your instruction book out and take a look at that. And let me finish this one off in blue. Again, I've gone ahead and done a little bit of work ahead of time. I've put in the straight of grain, I've put in the center back, and I've also put in the hip-shaped dart. Now, this dart, in fact, this dart on the skirt and the dart on the pants pattern, is likely going to be too long for a heart-shaped hip person. But please keep in mind that any dart can be shortened or lengthened as need be to suit your body, and it can be sewn with straight lines, or it can be sewn in a concave or convex curve. In the case of a heart-shaped person, you likely want to sew it in a concave curve. All right, now what about the side of the pattern? All right, her waist is 30 inches, so I'm going to mark in that 30 dot, and then her high hip is 40. Now, like I did on the pant pattern, if you want to shift, please go ahead and do that. In this case, I'm just going to use the dimension where it says high hip number. Her hip, her low hip is 38. So if I was to connect these dots together, look at what would happen to this side seam. It is going to swing inward like this, and that's not what you want to have happen when you're a heart-shaped hip person. You want your fabric to hang off of your high hip and just let it hang down nice and straight so that it kind of camouflages the fact that you're smaller in your low hip than you are in your high hip. So we actually are going to erase that dot, and I was hesitating there because I've done ink and I can't erase, but you're going to be drawing this in pencil, so you will simply erase that. I'm going to finish off the waist edge here like this, and now from this dot I literally want to drop the hemline or the side seam down pretty straight. I'm just going to be basically following a parallel line to the line that is on the master pattern. And of course you would have adjusted for your length, however long you want that pattern to be. And then I'm going to put in this heart-shaped hip person and heart-shaped hip curve. And then I'll finish off the hemline as well. And depending on how big you are around in the hem level, you might want to just slide your designing stylus along like this to get the best shape possible at the hemline. You really don't want your hemline hiking up on the side seam. Okay, now you again could easily sew this together. This looks a little bit pointy to me. I'd likely just smooth that off. But here is again another circumstance where I would be very, very inclined to make a secondary dart on her skirt. In fact, let me get the designing stylus. I'm going to bring this up just, kind of like this. And now I can go ahead and measure this and see what is that dimension. And that's actually 1 inch. On the pant, I did 3/4 of an inch addition at the waistline to straighten it. Here, I'm adding on approximately 1 inch. Whoops, I went crooked there, like that. All right, again, I'm going to measure from here to here, I'm going to visually mark that in half. And because this is a 1-inch extension that I added here, I'm going to put a 1/2 inch on either side of my center mark. And I'm going to, again, raise the dart tip up because I want it pointing more towards her hip bone. Again, both of these likely for this particular body are going to be too long in the dart shape, but that can easily be shortened once a test garment is done so that you know exactly where you want that dart tip to be. All right, so there we have our heart-shaped hip person. And again, remember your instruction books. On page 9 of the dress kit is where you're going to see the heart-shaped illustration and instructions. And if you take a look at page 8 in your pant kit instruction book, you're going to see the shifting of the pattern up and down for the high hip and the low hip. That's page 8, step number 6. And on the right-hand side of that, you are also again going to see illustrations for the various hip shapes, and you're going to see the illustration for adding a dart. So I hope that this has helped all of you heart-shaped hip people out there. I encourage you to make your comments in the video here just below where the comment section is. Are you a heart-shaped hip person, and what have you done to get your fit the best possible for your body? Or maybe you didn't know what to do. Please feel free to leave me your comments. I also encourage all of you, if you're not a member yet of SureFit Designs in our community, please make sure you go to surefitdesigns.com. There'll be a pop-up when you do, and sign up for our newsletter. There are 4 free gifts to get you started. And if you're watching this in YouTube, again, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. The next video that's going to come out is going to be on the diamond-shaped hip person, and you'll want to get notification for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.